You.
T?
How did you get past the guards?
That was challenging.
You cannot just break into a palace like you own the place.
If you don't have anything, you have to act like you own everything.
This movie means so much to a lot of people. I know it means a lot to you. I'm curious if there was just a moment on set where you were just like, holy crap, I'm here playing Aladdin in this film.
You know, I tried not to think about it that way. I didn't want to get into my own head about it, but Naomi would certainly look at me often and she'd be like, do you realize what you're doing? Like, so, yeah, I tried not to think about it, but it was pretty surreal.
When you first found out that you got this role of Jasmine, I'm curious what it was that you kind of just immediately clicked into, and then just the conversations that you had with Guy Ritchie about kind of what you wanted to do with this character.
I was already so excited well, of course, you know, getting this role was incredible. I was actually asleep because of the time difference. So I was woken, you know, my husband was next to me. He actually found out before I did. And I remember the next day, as soon as I woke up, I was like, did it happen? Is it real? But no, I mean, quite honestly, I felt like, you know, what I wanted to bring to this character really did align with what Disney and our producers and Guy wanted. It was just about, okay, how can we humanize this character? How can we give her more of a narrative, more of a story, and just, you know, naturally progress her from, you know, 27 years ago. It was quite a while ago, you know. But ultimately for me as well, I loved Jasmine growing up so much, so I really wanted to maintain the feeling that I had when I watched her and kind of take those things and make it personal for me. So that was my intention.
Well, I'm also just curious about kind of your relationship with the animated film, because I mean, I can imagine you like watching it once before the start of production and then kind of putting it aside, or just keeping it as something.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that was the thing. Is that you had to essentially capture the essence of the original production, and not betray the essence of it. So, and then thereafter you can't get too involved with it, so you let it sort of wash over you and then go, right, I've got to pay attention to this and not to that. But really my job was to somehow reconcile the old and the new there, and that you didn't add by subtraction really, you added by addition. Sure. So it was embellishment rather than subtraction. And you know, an obvious example of that would be to give an equality of challenge to Jasmine. She didn't really have that much challenge in the first incarnation, so we decided to flush out that character and give her a suitable amount of challenges.
Every day I think things will be different, but it never seems to change. Sometimes I feel like I'm
Trapped. Like you can't escape what you were born into.
Yes.
What was it like working with Alan Menken, who obviously has created so many of the greatest, like, incredible, like music examples from Disney legacy?
Yeah, I mean, he's a legend. You know, he's won 8 Oscars and been nominated for many more, and he's a genius at what he does. You know, I don't know exactly how his brain works, but it definitely functions on a different spectrum. You know, he's a music genius, so it was incredible.
Is there an intimidation factor?
No, not really. I mean, I think whenever you're making a film like this, you want the best of the best, and knowing that he was gonna come back and work on this, I mean, he tells us stories about the original that I would have never even dreamed of hearing before, so it's amazing.
I have 2 roles to play. One is to keep her the flame of the original, and the other is to be a part of a new team. Mm-hmm. So in the case of this one, we thought, you know, something new for Jasmine would be appropriate and good, and especially in these times of Me Too, to really hear that, you know, from her about wanting to be heard.
And have a voice, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious just also about kind of, after 27 years, kind of creating a song that fits in with the music that obviously everybody knows and loves.
Yeah, and the song itself has a different musical feel to it. It's my first collaboration with, you know, the team of Pasek and Paul as my lyricists, and that had an influence on me. It's got a little more of a pop, you know, flavor to it, a contemporary pop flavor, and so the job really was twofold. One, to make sure arrangementally that it really blends in with the rest of the score, and also as far as storytelling, that you lay the pipe to really support that being an important part of the emotional agenda of the picture.
It's just incredible. It's funny. The other day I was on the plane, and I was with Guy's wife, and we were like singing all our favorite Disney songs, and Alan was sitting there, and every time we'd sing something, he'd like have a little smirk on his face, and I'd be like, "You wrote that, didn't you?" Like, he just, he really is just like the best. So, Alan Menken, Pasek and Paul, who are obviously incredible. So that combination, that A-team, the fact that I get to sing a song that they wrote is pretty incredible. And, again, the song and the message behind the song, I think, is so... It's really powerful, and yes, it's in the context of a Disney movie and it's a Disney song, but my gosh, it really does translate, and it's a universal theme of, you do have a voice, and your voice does matter. We've all, at some point in our lives, felt shut down. So I feel like that is what this song is, and it comes at a point in the movie where, Jasmine has to have courage and says, right, it's now or never. So that the song carries a lot of weight, and I just, it really does live on its own, I think.
I will be silent, so you can't keep me quiet.
Let's rewind the tape. I mean, I did most of the work.
And I also just have to ask about working with Will Smith too, because legend in his own right, and
Yes.
I'm just obviously the relationship between Genie and Aladdin is so important. When in the process did you get to meet him, and did you geek out at all?
Yeah, I definitely geeked out. The first time I met him was during prep, before we started shooting, and I was so nervous I forgot to say my name when I went up and introduced myself, so really I didn't introduce myself. So yeah, I had to backtrack and go back, and it was a little awkward for me, but yeah, it's a dream come true. Me and the boys would get together when we were younger and put on a Will Smith movie. So it's amazing.
Strongest 10 regular men, definitely.
One specific bit that I really loved in the movie is the "Make Me a Prince" bit with the just guy out in the distance.
Hey, can you make me a prince?
There is a lot of gray area in Make Me a Prince. I could just make you a prince.
Oh, no.
Y'all see my palace?
I'm just curious, actually, two things. One, who played him, and B, did he get left in the desert?
Yeah. So I'm quite glad you asked that question, because he is Jamal Sims. Jamal Sims is our choreographer.
Oh, wonderful. That's great.
Who I have nothing but positive things to say about. For example, if people ask me what my favourite scene in the film is because I have the memory of a goldfish, I usually go for the last scene in the film, which is the dance sequence, right? Which was Jamal's. And I gave Jamal that challenge a week before, and I said, Jamal, and I thought I was sure he was going to fail, though he failed on nothing else. It was very hard to pull off a dance sequence in a short period of time. Anyway, he delivered on that. So Jamal was he was a key character throughout the entire production. I just want to go home, man.
That's great.
Yeah. So there was Jamal. We wanted to use Jamal to illustrate, because he was so integral to the movie. Anyone see my palace? Yeah. Where's my palace? Actually, had more dialogue. I think if you saw the whole thing of Jamal Sims and the Lost Prince, it was quite entertaining.
Could be his own movie, right? Yeah, that's great. As far as kind of adapting the music for animation and live action, is there a difference in approach?
Not with songs all that much. Although it's not so much live action, or I mean, it could be, but it's also 23 years difference. Is that what it is? I think
27.
27 years difference. How time flies. So, and that's tastes change, things change. Certainly, the underscore it has a different character to it. It's still theme driven. But there's more of a live action quality to it.
When you actually got to see the finished product, I'm curious, just what was your takeaway? What was your big reaction?
I just had a lot of respect and pride for Guy. He was able to put this together in a way that I think really makes it unique and works. And it's difficult putting a movie like this together because it's a musical in a way, but it's not in another way, and finding the balance of all that. I'm just really proud of the ethnic representation and what Guy was able to put together.
Do you think that just because, he has this history with like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels and Snatch, and being kind of the quote-unquote street rat character, do you think there was kind of a certain symbiosis there?
For sure, yeah. The first thing that I thought when I heard Guy was directing was that, yeah, it makes sense. This is a story about a street thief. He's made a living telling stories about criminals and thieves. So definitely, you know, I think he was able to really hit it home in that aspect.
I started directing. When I started directing, I just did music videos. I think I did about 40 music videos. So that was where I came from. Sure. Okay. And then music has heavily influenced all my other films. So honestly, it was a comfortable pair of old shoes for me, walking back into the world of what is really seen as a traditional musical. I just feel very comfortable in that particular world. But I agree. I mean, it doesn't seem like an obvious marriage, but I think when it would, if you'd had the history that I'd had.
Disney princesses are kind of a big deal, just a little bit. So I'm just curious about kind of being a part of that larger world, and also if you've had the chance to like meet Lily James or Emma Watson to just talk about being a part of that club.
No,
okay.
I would love to though.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think that even doing, you know, the promo for this movie, I'm realizing more and more and more, wow, like just the impact that these characters had on my generation, you know, growing up. So it's like the opportunity to potentially inspire like the next generation is like just mind blowing. And I think I felt it when we were in Oman. We went to a screening and literally just there was a bunch of kids and they'd just seen the movie and all these little girls just attacked me and I was just like, yes, give me the love. But like that was the moment that I was like, wow, like that's, you know, what I now feel like, you know, her. So that was pretty incredible. But it's And
that's the rest of your life. So
yeah, I know. And that's the rest of my life.
And I am just curious about kind of the challenges of bringing this world to life, because there are so many like big sequences. Not only like there's like the huge chase scene through Agrabah at the start, but like the big dance sequence. I'm just curious, kind of what for you was the hardest day on set?
I think having to combine things, you know, it's one thing to sit in a room or stand in a room and sing, but it's another thing to have to combine it with, you know, the action sequences in one jump. So that was a challenge. It was the first time I've had to combine things in that way. So I'd say the combination of different skills.
Bring it to live action. I'm curious kind of also about kind of the more realistic versus fantastical elements. Like, for example, obviously Genie is such an animated character, but like Iago is more of a parrot than an actual like talking character. So kind of how did you make those decisions?
It's a good question actually, and one that I don't mind talking about this one at all, it's funny what you can get away with in an animated production that you can't, my feeling is that you can't get away with it in quite the same way as a live action. So although you've still got magic carpets and blue genies coming out of bottles, there still has to be rooted in some form of reality. So it's hard if you have a parrot who has paragraphs of dialogue. Somehow it just sits uncomfortably in a live action production. So there was a sweet spot that we found between animals and their animation or articulation before you went too far, and then you went, hold on, this is sort of live action. But as I say, you're talking about wishes and genies, right. Yet somehow there's a position the mind occupies that accepts a certain amount of fantasy without becoming absurd.
Do you trust me?
Yes.
Oh, that's not my feet.
That's not my feet, right? Yeah, it's like...
By the way, how will the hat work?
I know, right?
Right, I tell you what to do. It doesn't work the other way around. What?